Hello and welcome to Tough Topics in LD episode 2.
So, hello everybody and welcome back to Tough Topics in LD. My name's Alistair Beverley and I'm joined by
Sean Williams.
And we are here to bring you the unscripted, unpolished, but hopefully not unprofessional Tough Topics in Learning Disability, where we talk about a lot of the topics that we don't think are discussed and bring up subjects that we think require a little bit more unpicking. So, Sean, since we last spoke, what's been new on your radar?
Well, not much. There has been. I've been in placement, so that's been a major focus. But that's finished. That's all been signed off. Didn't mess up at all. Which, yeah. Anyway, in terms of what's on my radar, obviously we've had the recent CQC report about restraint. That was very sad reading, but not entirely unpredictable.
Yeah.
We know there's plenty of bad practice about. It's good to see in a report, but what matters is action from it. We've also had the review of the leader review into the leader process around Oliver McGowan. Again, tough reading. And just a lot of mismanagement in that, and it just shines through about how processes didn't work then, and the questions are processes working now. So that's what's been on my radar in terms of the learning disability world. How about you, Alistair?
I think I've been picking up on the same sorts of things, and particularly there's been the CQC report as well, like you were talking about. There's been, as you say, the Oliver McGowan leader report, which, as you said, was tough reading, and I think all of us who work within the area of learning disabilities, or work with people with learning disabilities, or support families, or have siblings or family members with learning disabilities, we want real change. And at the moment, that yet again, it's another report, and it's disgraceful that we should be at the point where people are dying unlawfully, and yet we just and society just sort of goes, meh. And it's even almost coming to the point where we're becoming sort of apathetic about yet again more abuse, yet again more scandals, and it shouldn't be like that. I don't think we should ever really we should make a real conscious effort not to try and lose the outrage that comes from these things, because they are not right. Sorry, go on.
No, there's quite right. I mean, there's a risk of compassion fatigue, burnout, because it is not a constant. You could say a constant stream, but regularly we do have these reports come out, which if you're really trying your best to support people and work alongside families, or as you said, you've got family members who are going through these processes, it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah, it certainly is. Away from work, my daughter is just gone half term, so I took some annual leave last week. Had a great time with her. As some of you may know, I live in Nottinghamshire, and Nottinghamshire, because we want to be better than everywhere else, we've put ourselves into a new tier of Tier 3 Plus or something like that. We've invented a new tier, which means we've got some added restrictions. So just trying to get our heads around that and what that means for us. But every day is different. But I think the points we were making before that, about there's been these reports have come out, and scandals and what have you have come out, and I've seen very little spoken about on social media, which is where I generally lurk in the depths and the bowels. But there is very little that is spoken about. So I see a lot of parents of people with learning disabilities, some of whom are campaigners, some advocates. I see a lot of self-advocates talking about these things, and I think that's really important. But I see very little from professionals, and I think that is wrong. And I think we need to get better as professionals in being able to talk about these subjects, and that's sort of the subject of what today's about.
especially, and just to add to that, especially when a lot of professionals in the learning disability sector, do have those personal connections and reasons for doing what they do, whether it's a family member, whether it's a life experience. It tends to be people go into this arena for a reason. So yeah, the silence is perplexing.
It certainly is, and I think some of the points I want to touch on today is what is professional silence is a term that you and I have thrown about between ourselves, and what isn't. And I think it's not speaking up when things are wrong, regardless of your motivation and regardless of the reasons behind it. I believe personally, and I hope you'll see from my Twitter feed and social media feed that I think that we have a duty to speak up when there are things that are wrong, and I think it's almost to the point of unprofessional, to the point that people do not talk about it. Professionals don't talk about that, and I think that's one big stumbling block in trying to gain change. You have parents who push for change, who campaign for change, who are given the label problem parents. They're a pain in the bum, and actually sometimes worse. And I think that's very wrong. You get self-advocates who can be, well, they're really pushy, or they're really nosy, or they're just, they're really aggressive. And actually, I think when people are given those labels and when those labels are attributed to them, it doesn't help garner change. Whereas I think when we get when there is a voice from within services that says that this is wrong, I think that voice will help to garner change. I think we need to learn to work with parents and self-advocates and advocates to be able to call out these things and be able to start a discussion. And you and I have said all along, what we want from this is the start of a discussion amongst professionals about how we can support these narratives, because nothing that we're saying is new. But what we're trying to say is we need to get on board with these conversations that are taking place and not be afraid that that's somehow going to jeopardize your professional career.
No, quite right. We need to enter that dialogue. I mean, it's a Socratic dialogue. We should be learning from it and arriving at solutions amongst ourselves, with the people we support, with family members. And if we're not talking, then there's an element of that missing. There's an element of where solutions could be missing, because there is, as you were saying, there's just a lack of. I'm just doing a lot of nodding.
Yeah, sorry, Sean. Not all of these tough topics in LD will be things that Sean and I agree on, but I think kicking us off is one that is a big bugbear for both of us, as two people who are quite vocal on Twitter. And Sean, you've got a big Twitter following, 1,200-1,300 people. I'm relatively a minnow, and yet I look at the LD nursing community with awe. I really do, in terms of its scope, breadth, and general size. And I think that is such a potentially positive force for change. And yet I see relative silence. It's really quite perplexing.
It is. I mean, a topical example of that is recent example. Sorry. Is that I put a poll out recently about is anybody talking about reorganisation of services, or has been talking about reorganisation of learning disability services over the last period of time. And there's been a lot of people that have engaged with the post and looked at the post, but I think we had one vote, and despite a lot of activity from the community on at that time, because obviously I'm big fan of Twitter, so spend a lot of time on there. So yeah, it's a bit, again, I'll use the P word, perplexing.
It is, and these are important topics. For example, from a physio standpoint, there was a call, I think that went out yesterday, on Wednesday the 28th, from the Royal College of Occupational Therapists, the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, and the British Academy for Childhood Disability. And breathe. A statement that went out to MPs, saying that, I think it was to MPs, asking for protection from redeployment for AHPs and professionals within that service for children's services. And I was like, that's great. That is completely 100% behind that. And I asked, has anything been put forward for adult learning disability services? And 24 hours later, despite retweeting people and atting people directly, we've heard nothing. And it's concerning. It really is. I think, as I said, I'm a bit perplexed by the lack of engagement within LD nursing. I do need to recognise my own house and the fact that there is a relative absence of LD physio community online. There are a few of us. There are some people who like to lurk and not necessarily engage, and we're not necessarily asking people to put your necks on the line with the things that you're saying. But I think a retweet or just a comment, does go a long way to making people feel like they're on the right track and making people feel like actually the other people agree. Because right now, I think it feels like Sean and I are shouting in a bit of an echo chamber of shouting into the dark. I don't know about you, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, shouting across a deserted Tier 3 plus landscape, isn't it? With nobody out, nobody able to leave their homes, shouting into the wilderness. And as you were saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be, something public on Twitter or on a Facebook forum or whatever. It could be a DM. It could be a phone call. I'm sure our details are, my details anyway, are well publicised. So. Yeah, just a little bit of conversation.
And I think, Sean and I aren't asking this to try and gain Twitter notoriety or try and gain notoriety within the community in any way, shape or form. Sean and I are doing this because we think that it's the right thing to do, where we strongly believe that there is a need for change within learning disability services. I've tried to have a little look at, are there some reasons that people don't necessarily engage? And I'm happy to sort of unpick them a little bit here. Firstly, and I think it ties on with something you were talking about yesterday, Sean, about maybe a lack of shared purpose and interprofessional goals and a lack of MDT working.
Yeah.
I think when I remember back to my undergraduate days, when the dinosaurs were all around the land, we had interprofessional modules, not necessarily that focused. I mean, for physios, we don't even get a flipping separate degree relative to what you guys get in nursing. So interprofessional things are very generalist, and I don't necessarily think are the best garnerer of shared purpose. And I think that is something that we could look at. And you were talking yesterday about. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, I can remember there was some work done last year and the year before, I think. I've been on leave of absence, so I'm trying to put things in the timeline in my head. On shared preceptorship for all professions who join learning disability services, but that went quiet. I'd quite like to see it, but it went quiet. So, yeah.
And I think that there's been a few initiatives over the years that have sort of been good ideas or bright shining lights that have sort of fizzled out over time, and I don't know, that seems to be relatively indicative of a lot of the things that I've seen within learning disability practice, and it's sad to say, and so I think I don't know, is it that we need a re-energizing of what our shared purpose is? Do we need to create a shared purpose? Nurses are looking at X, Y, and Z, physios are looking at PQ and R, and OTs are looking at this, and social workers are all looking at that. And there was a move obviously for integration. They used to have the joint CLDTs, and now they seem to have moved back apart from health and social care. And it's kind of that the goalposts keep changing and keep moving. And I get that it's going to be from a government level, and it's going to be differences, and it's going to be change. But I still think that we can come together upon things like social media to try and create voices and then try and just again start a conversation. People, that's all we want, really.
Well, this is something I've said about nursing in general. The fact is that you'll find it tends to be less that nurses, for my opinions, less that nurses shape services and more that existing services shape nurses and nursing practice. And I think that's, if we don't have a strong professional voice in learning disabilities, then we're at the mercy of whatever services are commissioned to do, as opposed to setting our own agenda. And when I say setting our own agenda, that also means co-production and working with the people we support and families.
Yeah.
If we're strong, they can be strong as well, and we can arrive at the solutions we need, the teams that we want. But again, it's safety in numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that sort of fear of an inability to have critique without rancor, and so not essentially get your wrist slapped when you say something on social media is real. I've seen comments in the last month on social media where people are talking about there've been senior professionals talking about interactions between students and other professionals, and saying that there are unmonitored conversations, or I can't remember exactly what the language was used about. The conversations were happening on social media in the public domain that are unmonitored, and I'm sort of like, what that doesn't sit well with me, because I think people should be able to have the voice to say what they want, rightly or wrongly, and you're not, freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence, or absence from consequence. You can say what you want, but there may be consequences. But I don't subscribe to the notion that professionals should be somehow monitoring and coming down hard on what people are saying. If people are voicing and raising concerns, and we did do a Twitter poll on tough topics in LD about why people aren't engaged, and I think there's about a third of people said that. I think a third of people said that they were happy to talk in public and open about issues, but that means that there were 2/3 of people who were somewhat or not confident. And try and find that and put that on the screen, the results of that. But that fear of rancor and the people who are fearful of repercussion, I think, is a lesson to leaders in all professions, that regardless of what you feel and regardless of how you feel services are moving, that staff are still afraid to say what they feel. They are still afraid to speak out, and that there is an underlying culture within the learning disabled community, within the community professionals working with people with learning disabilities, that is not healthy to stopping these things that we've seen in the past years happening again. Sorry, go on.
No. I was just saying, it's you're quite right. It's a case of not in a sinister way, but it is a case of getting our house in order. In a sense of being organised and actually, being and having an open and transparent culture. That's, if obviously we're trying to get interaction over social media with various professionals and individuals, but the question is, are these conversations then happening at a local level? Are they happening at a national level? I'm not necessarily hearing them. I'd like to. If we're not having, where are the conversations taking place? Where is this openness and a commitment to transparency taking place?
Yeah, completely. And I think there's been a similar conversation happening over in Allied Health Professionals land with AHP's Day, Allied Health Professionals Day, and there were some questions around the validity and actually how whether that was a useful term and what that meant for us as physiotherapists as a profession, and talking about the shared voice and all that sort of stuff. And I think people need to remember that professional questioning and critique is not damaging. In an absence of apparent discussion that you and I are aware of anyway, how do we expect to improve without critique? Peer review is the stalwart of what science, scientific rigor and research is about. It's not an attack on any individual. It's not an attack on any professional body. It's not an attack on any profession. We're just trying to get things moving, and people saying what they feel from a professional point of view is not damaging. I personally feel.
No, and I'd agree. I mean, it's all about, part of being a professional is being able to critique and be critical. And as you say, it's the cornerstone of the scientific community. And if we are going to be evidence based and we are going to be scientific, about our work, as well as that values based practice as well, then we need to be able to have those discussions.
Certainly. And I think this is my slightly cynical minded, but I do think there may be a lack of desire. I think a lot of people are quite comfortable in their roles working with people with learning disabilities, and it may not be a truth for everybody, and I'm certainly not saying it does apply to everybody, but I think you'll know who you are if you're somebody who's just quite happy to come to work, take your paycheck. You don't get that much hassle. It's quite easy to communicate with people. It's easy to have a not the busiest work-life balance working in learning disability services. I feel
it's easy to get into a routine, isn't it? And that's the thing. I think for me as well, we've got to remember that people we support often have to fight for what they've got and what they have. As professionals advocating, we're supposed to be fighting for them, and we do. But equally, we've got to fight for ourselves as well. And when
Yeah.
you know services have been redesigned and roles haven't been backfilled, and you know things have been decommissioned or downgraded, then you know are we fighting for ourselves?
Well, I think that's a really good point, actually, Sean. The next point I was going to come on to is, on the flip side of that, about that, like, potential perceived lack of desire, is there a lack of time? As you said, the restructuring, that's not cost saving in any way, shape, or form. The chronic underfunding of services means that there are less people to do the same amount of work, or to do an increase in workload when there's improved diagnosis. And that all comes back to, having that seat at the table. And if you don't use your voice on a social media forum, how are you going to have the confidence or a voice to be able to challenge a commissioner, or challenge a CCG, or challenge the head of your service, or your trust head, when it comes to them saying, well, actually, we're going to take away this post, you're going to have to deal with it, or we'll take away this qualified and we'll give you, whatever. And your ability to then say, actually, no, that's not good enough, and this is why. And I think, we somehow have some sort of inferiority complex, I perceive, that we don't feel that we can say anything because people are so far out of reach that they wouldn't listen to us anyway. And hopefully this conversation that we're trying to begin will help people realize that people do sit up and take notice when you talk.
No, quite right, and that's the point. It is about, it comes back to the fact it's just talking. It's just talking. It's not necessarily being aggressive. It's not necessarily being critical without merit. It's not necessarily being nasty. It's just talking. It just allows people to start that conversation.
It is, and I'm probably one of the first to be bad at. I sort of speak a little bit impassionately, and I know that when I get on my soapbox a little bit, I speak a little bit quick, and it can come across a little bit a blunt northerner-esque. That's not the intention. We do just want to have a conversation, but at the moment, and we're happy to hear conversations and viewpoints from people who completely disagree with us. And I sat there right now watching YouTube thinking, these two muppets should shut up, or I disagree with everything you're saying. Please put those viewpoints to us, because we're happy to have our thoughts challenged. I don't hold that my professional work is part of my identity. My approach to how I work with people has changed drastically over the 10 years I've been qualified, and I hope that it will continue to evolve and change as I'm presented with new evidence, new viewpoints, and new ways of working.
Quite right. I don't think criticism I don't take personally, and I'm assuming you don't as well, Alistair. But that's the thing. There's nothing personal about it. It's about being professional, and it's about being professional. It's professionalism writ large, isn't it? On a poster,
Yeah, it is. And ultimately, we've got to remember, why we're doing this. We're not having this conversation so you and I can feel better about ourselves. We're having this conversation because we want to garner a pool of professionals who have a better voice, and therefore are able to support the people who we go to work on a daily or evening or nightly basis to go and help. We're here for people who to support people who may not have that voice, or to support that voice that people are putting out there. We want to say that as professionals, we agree that things aren't right, and that we also want to support you guys in your quest for change, because that people with learning disabilities don't deserve worse healthcare. And I think it's okay to say that. And I think it's okay to say, well, these are the things that we think that we need to put in place so that those things, so that can change, so that you can get better healthcare. So yeah, I'll be quiet now because I've talked quite a lot. Sorry.
No, don't worry. I mean, at least somebody's talking. So
yeah. I don't know if you've got anything else to add on that, Sean, or anything.
Not really. I mean, again, we're unscripted, so we did have a little bit of a chat beforehand about where we might be going with this, because at the moment it's a bit rough and ready, let's be honest. And I think that's where we were really. We just want to get the message out that we're here to talk, and we like to start that conversation. I mean, we had the polls, the Tough Topics and LD polls earlier this year. Again, mine with placement, my mind's all over my sense of time and space is all over the shop. So we've had those polls, and I regularly put out not challenging tweets, but not even controversial tweets. What would I say? Thought-provoking tweets to try and get a bit of conversation going. And well, this is just a shout out to get that going. And hopefully, this, something will happen from me and Alistair sort of talking again, Tier 3 Plus shouting in the wilderness. Is there anybody out there, considering it's Halloween this week?
Yeah, completely. We want to be here and we want to help people, and we want to help people. If people aren't confident and they're sat there thinking, "Oh, I couldn't speak out," get in touch with Sean and I. We're happy to voice any concerns anonymously. I personally am, speaking for Sean here, sorry. But I'm happy to pass on, things if people don't feel confident to speak them out loud. But I think you as a professional or even as a student have a voice, and it's important that we learn how to use it and learn how to use it for constructiveness and learn how to use it to support and improve services for the people that we work with.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm sure everybody's aware that it's International Year of the Nurse, and they've extended it into next year because of COVID, and there's lots
It's selfish having 2 years, honestly.
It wasn't my decision. But there's lots about nurses, being there are questions about it, but there's the prevailing narrative from that sort of the nurse thing is where nurses are stronger together. They have political function, political voice. Can be change agents, and I think it's about time that we stood up and did that from a learning disability nursing perspective and learning disability professionals perspective. It's about time we got political. Not in a capital P sort of party politics, but just with a small p.
I think that's a nice way to end it, with a small p. I think thank you very much everybody for listening and watching. Sean, if there's anything else from you at all?
Not really. Again, we didn't expect to probably put something out as so soon, but we did. So who knows when the next one's coming? Yeah,
who knows? Yeah, it could be 6 minutes, it could be 6 weeks, who knows? Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all in episode 3.
Take care. Bye-bye.